Welcome to the Growth Engine podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Laura Brown, Global Marketing Director at M&G Investments. With over a decade at M&G, Laura has led teams across investment marketing and strategic planning, intertwining business acumen with creative marketing. She's a former entrepreneur and confectionery trailblazer, lauded for her gourmet sweets business, infusing her strategic approach with an entrepreneurial spirit. Laura brings a wealth of knowledge in steering M&G's marketing to drive growth and innovation. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Could we kick off by you giving us a bit of a background to your role at M&G and what it is that you do there?
Sure. So I am responsible for the global marketing activities for the asset management part of M&G, and have been at M&G on and off for about 20 years now, which is quite scary. And I'm responsible for channel marketing activities, which includes, I guess, support for events, collateral, advertising, brand, in terms of the activation for the M&G Investments brand, client intelligence of understanding what the clients require of us. And we also have an investment marketing team who do written content and things like that. So a wide range.
Right. And I had a look at your LinkedIn profile before we met, as you'd expect, and I realised that you didn't start in marketing. You've actually got a very strong background in business strategy, which you've worked at majority of the time in M&G. So can you talk to me about that and why it was that you decided to sort of jump over the fence, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose I've had kind of two jumps from strategy to marketing within my career at M&G, actually. So started in a kind of grad scheme at M&G and ended up doing strategic planning for the asset management wholesale business.
Okay.
And then during that time, there became opportunities to take on more of the investment marketing, so the content events piece, and I had some perspective on how we could do that. I had some ideas and was also quite keen to take more ownership. So that was back in, I think, 2007 or so. It was
Right.
a long time ago. Oh my god. And then more recently, when I returned to M&G back in 2018, I came back in to look at the asset management business strategy, which is effectively kind of almost like an internal consultancy team. So we're working with the leadership team to develop and articulate the asset management business strategy, doing internal projects, working with finance on the business planning and things like that. And again, during that process, I mean, it's a really great role. You get to know everything that's going on in the business. You're in the room, which is always a really good thing to be involved in. But increasingly, I was kind of ready to get more involved and have more responsibility for actually delivery. So not just recommending what we needed to do, but actually being responsible for doing it. So
Right.
that was where the my interest came, and there was a restructure in the marketing team going on, taking it from a central function into the asset management business. So I made my pitch at that stage to say, please, can I have a go?
It's unusual that route, because I mean a lot of the times within marketing, when you're reading about marketing, one of the most common kind of bugbears is that there's not enough strategy in marketing, and marketers can be accused of being too tactical. So to come the other way, you must have quite a unique perspective within
obviously
running a
that
marketing
you're
team.
basically replaying my interview for me. Yeah, I think I don't know if that is the case. I think sometimes the marketing teams kind of get a bad rep for that, but certainly with the way that I've approached it is very much understanding kind of what does the business want to do, and then what does marketing need to do to support that.
Yeah.
So you start with the business requirement and then go to what the teams need to do to help with that, rather than an isolated, disconnected marketing function, which I guess is a risk, but yeah, certainly would bring that approach.
Having that approach, are you in discussions with the senior team?
I think
at
it
M&G?
helps with credibility with both the sales teams and with the kind of senior leadership team, because obviously I've come from a different angle in terms of observing and understanding the marketing activity and what it needs to do to help support the growth. And an understanding kind of what the important metrics are from a business perspective. So it sometimes helps with kind of, I guess, pitching what we need in terms of budgets or why we're doing what we're doing.
Can you expand on that about to explain how you would go about having that discussion with the senior team, talking about the specific metrics that the
So
business?
I mean, I guess it's thinking about what's important for them, which is, revenue growth ultimately, and then understanding what their priorities are to deliver that, whether that be channel expansion, particular regions, or a particular investment capability that we need to grow. And then knowing that, working out how the things we want to do support that. So, and I suppose some of that is across how we would talk about sort of product marketing or channel marketing, so specific commercial objectives that need to be achieved. But then there's also the work that we need to do from a brand point of view, which I guess is often the harder thing to get everyone to understand why you need to do it. And I think that's been something that I've been quite focused on this year, is to really try and articulate why we're trying to do both, not just one.
So you've been in your role now just under a year.
Yes,
just over a
exactly.
year?
So I took it on sort of on interim basis this time last year, and
Okay.
then formally in the February.
When you came in, what's on your to-do list for the year?
What's been really brilliant about the year is kind of seeing what's already in the team, like the people that are in the team, and listening to them. So a lot of it was just about understanding what ideas they had and what we wanted to do. Some of it was about foundations. So we kind of just had a look at sort of the support model we had with sort of agency relationships and things like that. So we did a bit of the, sort of the usual sort of
Bit of housekeeping.
housekeeping, get the foundations in place. There's been a bit of looking at sort of digital and kind of where we are from that perspective, which is we've got lots of the tools, but not necessarily using to the full extent, which I think is probably quite a common feature in the marketing space in asset management.
We
So
see a
that's
lot
something.
of hear about a lot of that more it's in the kind of I guess the Martech space.
Yes.
Is that what you're
Yeah,
referring
exactly.
to?
So we're lucky we've got lots of the different tools, but we've definitely got opportunities to make more of them. Which is a good place to be. We're not having to make the case to go and buy them,
No.
but we can definitely make more of them.
We've met a few people on this podcast that are in different stages. They're either getting in their Martech stack or struggling, in the sense of we've got all this, but once it's in, and it can be such a mission to get the right equipment in, and then what do you do with it once it's in? So it sounds like you're in that second part.
Definitely. I mean, it kind of ties back in, I guess, to that kind of point where everyone's trying to demonstrate the value of marketing, and some of that you do at the front end, which is saying this is the case for giving us some investment, and some of it is showing you gave us that investment, this is the return on that. And obviously some of those tools in the Martech space really help you with that latter point.
I'd want to dive into that a little bit more, but before we move on, I want to talk about your role, because you were in M&G, you took a break, and you've come back, and you've got an unusual story about when you took that break. Can you expand on that?
So I had 3 children and decided at that stage I was kind of like, right, I think I need a bit of time, spend some time with them, and then did that, but also then started a business. So I set up a confectionery.
Because it's nice and peaceful.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was a bit slightly random decision making, to be honest. But I set up a confectionery business making sweets, sort of gourmet sweets for grown-ups was the kind of pitch, which was like caramels and sherbet dib dabs, and kind of all just with elevated flavors and that kind of thing. Honestly, my children have never forgiven me the fact I don't still do this. It's
I
a
can
bit
imagine.
they're like, what do? You used to do this, and now you do that. But
you've gone from Willy Wonka.
I know. Well, exactly. I'm not sure it was ever quite that exciting, but it was definitely probably more exciting than marketing and asset management. Not that that's not exciting, but certainly for if you're 12, it's not quite as thrilling. So I mean, it was everything really, from kind of product development and working on that to getting involved in a launch, and it was really interesting, enjoyable, had some really good highlights, had some lowlights in that.
It was phenomenally successful. You were getting...
Well, I mean, I think, so some bits were really successful, wasn't it? We ended up in some really high profile shops, but did we ever make any profit? No. So, yes, but lessons in that process, definitely.
It was I mean, the range of stores I saw that you were stocked in was enormously impressive. But it's
in some ways sort of too successful too quickly, as in it got to the point where the manufacturing couldn't keep up with the demand, and that meant that I had a sort of scale problem more quickly than I might have expected. And when I was doing sort of trying to do 3 days a week because of the children, and then that was sort of eating into it when you have to sort of wrap sweets and
Yeah, of
package them
course.
and do all of that kind of stuff. So yes.
So that eventually that you kind of let.
It got to a point where that I tried to find a factory, so I was like kind of like, right, we can't. My husband was coming home from work and having to wrap sweets in the evening, so it got to the point where it just wasn't sustainable and it
No,
wasn't
no,
fun.
no,
So
no.
the bit that I really enjoyed was the sales marketing element of it, which I guess is reassuring.
Yes.
But the sort of factory delivery of it was not what I enjoyed
No,
as much. So it was I tried to find an outsource option, try and find a factory partner. I just couldn't find anyone to make it
no.
at a price that
That would
was cheaper
work.
than how I could do it with a couple
No,
of
no.
people at home.
Was this pre-Brexit? So presumably that challenge would have got
Yes, it
harder
was.
after.
Yes, it was. So I did have it had even it had a Dutch a
Yeah,
department store on the list, but yeah, that would have become quite impossible, I think
yeah,
now.
yeah. I've got a few friends that have one's a tea manufacturer and ended up having to move a factory over to Europe because of the
Yeah,
red
if you're
tape and
exporting there as well, it's hard, right?
yes. But anyway, so that
Yes.
you passed
Yeah.
from the confectionery business and back to M&G.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued to see from the lessons that you've learned from running your own business. Were you able to bring any of that wisdom into your
I mean,
new role?
I think the first thing it did was it was a sort of an attitude change, kind of coming out from the corporate world and kind of
Yeah.
being quite, I really enjoyed my job. I, kind of attached yourself to kind of what you're doing. I think that disconnect happened during
Yes.
that time where I was out from the work and also having to close a business and kind of accept that that's not failure of you as a person.
Yeah.
So that I think that has honestly been quite healthy in my
Yes.
return to the corporate world, as in it just gives me some distance in kind of understanding what really makes a difference and what
Yes.
doesn't. And then in terms of the marketing side, I think it just I had to do everything. So I was my social media manager, I was my packaging designer,
Right.
I was, yeah, all of it. So really, really fun, really interesting, but getting quite hands-on and
Steep
seeing what
learning curve, I
steep learning
imagine.
curve,
Yeah.
definitely. It made me quite fluent in social media at the time.
Yes.
And probably use it still a little bit too much as a result, to be honest.
When you come back into the corporate role, because you don't, I guess previously you didn't have that knowledge on all of those different tactical elements of marketing. So when you came in, was that part of your interest in moving from strategy into
I
marketing?
think I'd
Because
always had lots of ideas from a marketing point of view, and that one of the challenges of marketing is everyone's got an opinion on it,
yeah,
right? So I suppose that isn't unique, but had some ideas that things I thought would be good from a marketing point of view, and yeah, I think it did. It has occasional influence. I think just in terms of some of the things I consider.
so let's move again. You're back in M&G.
Yeah.
You've made the transition from strategy
Yes.
into marketing. I'm interested to explore how you may go. Your approach may be unique in what you bring from strategic planning and insight into understanding what the business is focused on and how you start executing that as a marketing plan. Is there anything you can tell us about that?
I mean, I don't know if it's unique, so certainly wouldn't assume that. But I think where I start, I guess, is looking at the plan and the conversations with sales on where their priorities sit, and then also because I'm not a marketer by kind of background, I've spent a bit of time, I guess, reading marketing literature, listening to podcasts, all that kind of thing, just to really educate myself
Yeah,
so that I understand kind of what the science tells you. Being in the in the strategic planning side,
yeah.
you get a real focus on data and using that as a way to make your case. So I think that has been a focus as well, is looking
Yeah.
at that.
Where were those resources? What were those
I mean, it's
resources that you
definitely
leapt on?
started from a sort of a podcast and then going into those things after that. So I suppose key things would be, I mean, the Uncensored CMO is
Right. Yeah.
a great podcast that has a good, not as good as this one, obviously, but
Especially this very
especially this
one.
episode, yeah. But really, has really good insight into sort of the long and the short of it. So I feel
Yeah.
and other sort of Ehrenberg Bass and then the CMO scorecard that LinkedIn have recently produced. So
Yeah.
the B2B Institute at LinkedIn, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah.
So it's just elements like that. I mean, Mark Ritson can't go unmentioned, I suppose, in these things as well. So lots of lots of interesting and almost distilled information that's probably available much more easily now than it may have been a few years ago too, which is great.
Yeah.
Often you can obviously overread these things and obsess with all of those,
Yeah.
but it's just taking elements of that and saying, well, how does that help us?
Interesting. So you talked a little bit about I guess, operational execution, sales tactics versus brand building, very much in that area of
Yeah.
long and the short. So
Yeah.
how do you then go about building out that knowledge and then start executing on what the business is looking for?
I mean, I guess the lesson in all those ones is the both point, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
the and in the long and the short of it that's the key. And I suppose that's the bit that we've been trying to do as a team, which is challenging from a capacity point of view, always trying
Yeah.
to kind of do these things simultaneously. But so we've really tried to look at it on those two elements. We try and work with sales. That's where the channel marketing teams come into their own. They've got those relationships with the local sales teams, understand their priorities, and try and execute as part of that sales team.
Yeah.
And then you've got kind of brand side where we're really looking at, well, what do we want to be known for? How do we best activate and deliver that? Do we have any money to do so?
Yeah.
Those kind of big questions, really.
The relationship between sales and marketing, has that always been strong at M&G? Is it?
I mean, I think, yes, definitely at the country level, I think that's always worked really, really well. And I think you get, because they're generally sort of almost smaller teams sitting in market, you often get that really, really strong entrepreneurial sense of a team. I think it varies, it ebbs and flows, right? When everything's going well, one team wants to take the credit.
Yeah.
When everything's going, is more challenging, then it might be more difficult. But yeah,
it's something that I've been working within asset management marketing now, I think for probably 10 years or so, and I've heard that originally when I started, sales and marketing were very, very separate teams. Then there seems to be this coming together of recognizing, working together. But now certain organizations are starting to merge them under one department and changing name from distribution to
client group.
Yeah. So there seems to be, we seem to be midway in this evolution. And I just wondered where M&G were within that.
I think
spectrum.
Historically it's always been really very strong in terms of that partnership. You've always seen quite a strong alignment between the two.
Right.
But in terms of the sort of structural piece, we're absolutely under that distribution team. We haven't called it a client group, but it's distribution, product, and marketing is all under one.
Right. Okay. And the team that you've got a pretty large team. I know not as large as some asset managers, but I think you said there's about 80 that sit within marketing. How's that structured out?
So we have a European and Asia channel marketing team, so two different teams based locally. So there are different teams within different locations within each of those teams. And then we have within the London hub, we've got an investment marketing team that includes product marketing, product reporting, presentations, sort of pitch decks and so on. We have also within that a kind of thought leadership writing team, so all the sort of written content comes from there. There is an events team,
Right.
and kind of provide that specialism in terms of delivery and strategy from an events point of view. And then I also have a marketing strategic planning team, which kind of I sort of introduced this year, I guess, with my background. Kind of thinking really I needed help with change and also the planning and creating some consistency.
And how do they almost work on the different geographic regions that you focus them in on, or could it be products? Yeah.
They will generally work sort of across, really. So we might be working on sort of the institutional plan, or we might be kind of going, right, we as a team, we're missing this tool, or we need to work out how we make better use of the marketing tech stack. So there'll be different projects, different elements that they would work in, but they're working with the sort of team heads, but really just to help facilitate that, because it's quite hard to do when you're trying to do it at the side of your desk.
And is that department you set up? And so were those individuals already in place?
They were in the building, but it was a kind of focus of what they were doing. Yeah.
But are you happy to talk about that?
Yeah.
So how many people are in that?
Just two.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are they, marketers by trade? Are they
Yes,
more?
they're marketers by trade.
Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay, yeah. That's interesting. I haven't heard of that in a unit, which is surprising, really. So
Well, I mean, it's all is as much as also kind of helping me. Well, you have so many demands in terms of kind of
yeah,
what's the plan here, what's the plan here, and all of that kind of thing. It's actually just providing that
mm,
quality
yeah,
in that articulation as well,
yeah,
that really helps. And obviously there's, fun and games around controls, compliance, risk, and
yeah,
so on that also require some focus. So I would say they're also covering that as well within
yeah.
their remit.
Which presumably gives you a bit more headspace because you're not. Otherwise, you'd be delivering all of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. It's really, hugely beneficial from that point of view. It means I can go and be incredibly annoying about having
But
like
that's about
ideas and
having
observations,
conversations.
in terms of the team and go, what about this? But yeah,
Yeah,
it does give a bit of that space, which is a good and bad thing, I think, depending on
yes.
who you're.
When you've come in, you're setting up this department. You're pretty much a year in place now. How do you start measuring the impact of your team, and how do you show that you're contributing to sales?
So I guess it's across the two kind of areas. So from a brand point of view, we've got brand sort of KPIs that we're looking
Hmm.
to hit, which we use sort of external brand research to help us with. So Broadridge and NMG are kind of two
Yeah.
surveys that we use, and then that would be the primary KPI that we would use to measure how we're doing.
Hmm.
Using things like the Fund Buyer 50 as our kind of end of year
Okay.
objective. And then from a sort of commercial perspective, it depends on the campaign. I suppose it depends on what we're trying to do. So it might be market share within a particular
Mm-mm.
asset class. Are we helping to grow that? It might be brand awareness metrics within that asset class or product. It might be pure sales. It might be feedback. It's a combination of the two, as well as, I guess, specific KPIs around, campaign activity, whether that's engagement or visits or
Yes.
whatever it might.
You mentioned about tracking the brand and tracking brand's
Yeah.
performance. What what are you currently doing to enhance the brand visibility in the market?
So we have been in the last few months doing a bit more sort of out of home activity in certain markets, doing some sort of targeted campaigns in those,
Mm,
both at a sort of account based marketing level and also overall. So depending on the market, we've been trying a few things there, and then we've also been trying out a few things to make us a little bit more visible, given we want to make our budgets work as effectively as possible. So trying a few other things from a creative point of view.
okay.
We've launched a new magazine called Ampersand, which is a kind of combining sort of thought leadership, but also in a kind of highly designed way,
It
using lots
looks
of
it looks
infographics. And
beautiful. I had
yeah,
something a
I
look
mean,
at.
all done internally, like really, apart from the comic book, which
Yeah,
we used a sort of specific artist for that. But yeah, just trying to approach things in a slightly different way, hopefully to
yeah,
make people kind of make us a bit more memorable.
yeah. Is that purely, is it purely digital?
No, so we print
Okay.
not thousands of copies, but for events.
Yeah.
So to hand out there, and that's been really well received too. So just a kind of combination of things.
Yeah, I was super impressed by it.
Oh, thank you.
The
Yeah,
writing was,
the team
well,
was
the writing was fabulous, but the design was absolutely stunning
really, really good
as
job
well.
and fun. I think. I know that sort of you can't put a value on fun, but
Mm,
from a team perspective, the work on that I think has been really, really
mm,
enjoyable, and obviously that helps when you're often dealing with potentially more dry things as well. So having a bit of
yes.
that combination.
And how regular is that? Is that?
It's going to be half yearly
Yeah,
at the moment. I
yeah,
think
and
unless we get crazy demand and we have to do it as a full-time
yeah,
thing. But yeah, half yearly is the plan.
yeah. And what is there measurements on that you put into place?
I
Is
think
it
when we
more?
launched it, we were looking really for a sort of client feedback as an
Yeah.
anecdotal thing is something we will be looking for. We've got sign-ups, kind of people who are registering to, receive information on future
Mm,
copies. That's been going quite well, I think, given expectations.
yeah,
But yeah, they're the main measures at this stage. I think we would ideally see it as contributing to kind of an overall brand
yeah.
perception, but that's obviously you can't point specifically to
No.
Ampersand's role in that.
No, no. Okay. And you mentioned that you're trying different things in different regions. Can you?
I suppose it depends on kind of how well we're known in different spaces. So, I mean, one example is so within Ampersand, we have a comic from our Bond Vigilantes
Yep.
team. So Bond Vigilantes is our fixed income team's blog that's been running for over 10 years now. Hugely successful. And we sort of taken that, created these sort of comic book characters from the team, but we've then used that in events. So in the UK and Europe, we've used that as kind of the styling for events. We've kind of gone with a fully kind of pop art kind of concept. But in Asia, for example, we would do that quite differently. We're not known in lots of Asian markets. We're introducing ourselves, so we're taking quite a different approach there in terms of building our awareness. We'll save sort of Bond Vigilantes perhaps for a later date when they understand us and know us, so that rather than presenting ourselves in that way.
Bond Vigilantes was one of the first
Mhm.
references I heard about when I first started working in this space.
Yeah.
And it was really fresh and new, and everyone was
Absolutely
going crazy for it,
absolutely.
wasn't it?
And the vision from the investment, the reason it's lasted so long
Mm.
and has so much credibility is it's come from the investment team. So Jim Levis, who's the CIO of fixed income, his idea,
Yeah.
and that's why we're still doing it, but also
Yeah.
why people still engage with it, and it's got high quality
Yeah.
kind of content. It's almost because from a marketing perspective, we're quite a light touch in that
Yes.
process rather than getting in the way. We try and just help it to happen. And then
Well, that's an enormous success, isn't it, as a piece of content marketing in this
absolutely.
space? It's
Absolutely.
probably, I would say, it's up there, if not the longest running
It
format.
certainly was one of the first ones that came out to market.
Yeah.
And probably, as you say, one of the longest running.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see that's how it's evolved, and
Yeah.
now into comic book
Yes,
characters.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that we might have to do more frequently than 6 monthly. I think that's
Yeah.
been well received.
There's also a launch video, and in my notes I've got Wes Anderson. Can you?
Yes. Okay, so this is a slightly random idea that I had where we want to do something for the launch that what didn't feel like here's another thought leadership magazine from an asset manager, that was slightly out of the ordinary. So we're trying to take inspiration, I guess, from whatever, from a pop culture point of view, is happening at the time of the latest edition launch.
Yes.
And I mean, I guess our options back in September was sort of the Barbie movie and Wes Anderson. So Wes Anderson definitely felt the safest, much as I would have been tempted. But it's definitely the safest option from a sort of kind of brand point of view, and just an opportunity to create something just slightly fun and out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, the engagement on that social post is like the best performing one we've had this year for a long
Fantastic.
time. I mean, it definitely internally as well as externally
Yeah.
has created a few wry smiles and fun things. And we've had offers from within the business. Loads of people want to be in the next one.
Oh, that's
So if
great.
anyone has any ideas for what that topic should be, like what the theme should
Yeah.
be, that would be very helpful, because we're sort of a
Yes.
bit stuck.
That's interesting. There seems to be a common theme that about having fun, and whether that's internally for your team and making sure that they're enjoying what they're doing, but also there seems to be this slight lightness of touch, which is really refreshing, that you're not taking yourselves too
No,
seriously.
I mean, I think we can do serious work without being completely serious, and I think
Yeah.
that is really, really important. And I think it creates differentiation, to be honest, in what is a heavily saturated market from a marketing communications point of view for asset management. And the tendency is, because the topic is serious, is to deliver it in a very dry way. And I think there are opportunities to do that. That doesn't mean we're doing it across everything.
No.
You've got to pick your moments.
Of course.
But yeah, absolutely, I really believe that is a way to differentiate yourself, and, to be honest, have more effect in terms of the impact.
There's an infographic that's published, I think, there's a data visualization chap that's really big on LinkedIn called James Eagle. Is it Eagle?
Well, Eagle is his company.
Yeah, and I think he was saying that the investment products are approaching 1 million products globally.
That wouldn't surprise me.
And the need for differentiation in
huge.
such a crowded space.
There's a stat sort of from Market Watch PLC, which is the number of asset management marketing communications that go to IFAs in the UK. So in 1 month it's about 1,800, and in a year it's about 80,000. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So if you're going to send out another piece, how do you make sure your email's opened? How do you make sure people want to come to your event? It is a challenge.
Yeah. Culturally, within a lot of asset managers, there's a real, I guess, almost fear of pushing the boundaries a little bit too much. But it
I mean,
doesn't sound like that's the case at
well,
M&G.
certainly. I mean, I can't speak for anywhere else. Obviously, you've seen my CV. I haven't worked anywhere else. Certainly, for, the way I'm talking to my team is absolutely. Let's just try some things. Not all of them are going to work,
Yeah.
but it will. That is what we want to test and see.
Mm-mm.
It's helpful when the data backs up the thesis that
Yeah.
more interesting, more creative results in better response. And we just need to demonstrate that that's true to be able to push it a bit further. We're not going to go full entertainment just yet, but I think there'll be a bit more of that.
Going back to what you were saying at the beginning of our discussion about listening to the marketing podcast, and this is what they'll tell you, that
Yeah, absolutely.
creativity gives you
It
more
gives you the edge, right?
effectiveness.
Yeah, it's like 78% of B2B ads are defined as dull.
Yes. And if you can cut
okay,
through
there
that,
you
and yeah, it's
I mean, obviously, I now need to actually deliver some ads that don't fit into that category, but
but like you say, it's not all pieces. So you I guess you start with perhaps more of the cutting through for the brand awareness, and then you can there's still
definitely.
time
And
to,
there's places you can do it more, social, other thing, event space, you probably can do more of that. Whereas, in proper white papers or certainly from a servicing point of view, there are, you shouldn't be doing that. So yeah, you find your pick your moments.
and the big territories for you,
Mhm.
being Europe
Mhm.
and Asia.
Yes.
With you mentioned a little bit about it being less well known in
Mhm.
Asia, so that do you still take a kind of like distinctive approach?
Yeah, I'd say we do. And we've taken ampersand
Okay.
out to Asia, and we're just sort of testing. Really, we kind of want to make sure people understand who we are before we kind of immediately go with what might be seen as slightly more zany
Yeah.
approach to things. But it's definitely part of the mix.
Mm.
And so it just depends where we are. So in Taiwan, we're sort of at that early stage in terms of increasing our visibility. In other markets, we're more established. So it just depends.
And within Europe, is it fairly consistent within Europe, the
In terms of
approach?
our kind of awareness and pitch,
Yeah.
yes, I'd say so. It depends. We're generally well known from a fixed income perspective, partly bond vigilantes, partly
Yeah.
just sort of, capabilities we've sold in the past, and we sort of, that would be quite consistent across the whole of Europe. And then within that, there would then be some variants of what else we might be known for,
Yes.
depending on whether the market was more institutional or wholesale.
We've talked a little bit about this. This is marketing literature and science.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so you mentioned Ehrenberg Bass
Yes,
Institute, which is obviously the home of marketing science,
yes,
with
yes.
Byron Sharp, and I forget
Yeah.
who's.
Oh, and Jenny Romaniuk. That's
Yes.
the name. I think I don't know if I said that correctly, but that's
Yeah, I think you've done better than I would. Tell me about how you kind of like take that knowledge
I
and
mean,
start to apply.
I would definitely say I'm not spending hours and hours reading the detail, but I have got I've got copies of Byron Charles' book and Jenny's book on sort of building brands and all those.
Distinctive
Yeah,
assets and
exactly, and all those kind of concepts I think have been really just interesting when I'm kind of thinking, okay, where are we in our
mm,
process when we're thinking about the brand and how we develop it, and that's all been really useful. But I wouldn't say I kind of take it and then we follow it exactly. It's
no,
more, I guess, just sort of
you
interesting things that
use it as
I'm
a tool
curious
to
about.
reflect on.
Yeah, exactly. And then go and kind of ask annoying questions, as I said.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I think the Ehrenberg Bass is supported by mainly FMCG brands, and
Yes,
particularly Unilever, I
yes,
believe.
I
So
think so.
again, when I look at those kind of that kind of literature, it does require that process of translation, doesn't it?
No, definitely. You can't kind of take it completely. And I think when you, so the B2B Institute on LinkedIn has probably taken
Yeah,
some of those theories and definitely has much more relevance.
yeah,
Again, it's not purely financial services, but there's a
mm,
lot within that. Certainly a lot of the advertisers on LinkedIn from a B2B point of view are
yeah,
financial services, so they have got a lot of data on sort of
yes.
how we're doing. So is all of those bits.
Yeah, and what you sound well read around a B2B institute. Are there any
The
pieces that
CMO scorecard, which is quite a relatively recent, but certainly within the last 6 months,
okay,
is a really useful way of thinking about kind of how you should be assessing success in terms of sort of brand awareness,
okay,
in terms of what are the different components that you should be thinking about when you're thinking about media spend, creativity,
Right.
what's the most important thing that can move the dial, and comes back to creativity.
Right. So I haven't seen that. So
Yeah,
that's
it's really
a good tip for me
Yeah.
to go and have a
No,
look
definitely.
at. CMO scorecard.
Yep.
Anything else that pops the top of
Well,
mind?
there's a podcast I'm listening to at the moment called Let's Make This More Interesting.
Okay.
Adam Morgan, and it's really good. There's lots of different ideas for ways to make topics more engaging, or delivery mechanisms, lessons from a producer at the X Factor, for example, about how, so I don't know, just things like that that I think usually just give me one idea that will
Yeah.
be kind of.
I always use X Factor when I'm talking about formats for
Yes.
videos.
Yeah.
So I always say that no matter where you are you can turn on X Factor or at any point in the show, and you kind of broadly know where you are. And that to me is the beauty of formats, and repeatable formats. So when you can start
Absolutely.
creating video content. So yeah, that's my go-to there.
Excellent. Well, this is really interesting because it's all about kind of how do you make everyone, thousands of people that they see, but how can you make everyone's story kind of interesting when actually lots of people's stories are the same? And that's
that sounds
interesting when you think
fascinating.
about, I guess, asset management pitches or anything like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of
Yeah.
ideas.
Looking ahead, let's call it a year in. What does what's the vision over for M&G and your role over the next 12 months?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for us, I mean, that brand success is really important, but also being seen to kind of really be pivotal in that commercial process, or that growth process for the sales teams, is really, really important. So I think that internal recognition for that support, as well as the kind of external metrics to back that up, is key.
Yes.
From a team point of view, I kind of been saying to them, we kind of just want people to kind of go, oh, you work at M&G, that must be good. You must be doing, because you're doing
building that
people
almost pride element.
I think so. I think that's really important. And there are definitely, hopefully, things we're starting to do, but at least internally we're thinking, oh, okay, right, good, we're really, like, that's fun. And like I said to you, I kind of came back having a bit of distance from it, so I kind of want to make sure that we feel like we're making a difference in terms of what we're doing. I don't mean that in terms of a big purpose thing, but I think in terms of the activity that we're doing, we're making a real difference to what the business is doing.
Yeah, and I guess that's partly linked into what you're saying about the team really enjoying working on the Ampersand project, taking pride in that element, but also elevating the brand itself.
Yeah, exactly. Serving, having commercial benefit, but also hopefully being something that
good for the soul slightly as well.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of that.
Yeah. The elements you talked about around the Martech and what's the sort of plans there over the next?
Yeah, I mean, really, we've got some work to do on our website, kind of from a foundational point of view, to sort of address some of the kind of challenges from a structure and design point of view. I'm sure, my peers probably say something similar from that side. It's a bit of a monster in terms of the scale of it, so we need to kind of really think about how that works, and then looking at things like lead capture, nurturing, how we really make more use of that, not focusing too yet in the next year on the nth degree of marketing attribution. It's more about making sure we can demonstrate, whether that's at an account-based marketing level or just more generally at a country level, that we're starting to add some value. So that will take some time, but certainly the proof of concept is going to be really, really important in that.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us today and having a wide-ranging discussion.
My pleasure.
Covering sweets to Ehrenberg Bass, Mark Ritson, and Byron Sharp. I think we've covered many bases. And given me a bit of reading material to go back to with as well. So I'll be looking at LinkedIn B2B Institute. So
excellent.
Great stuff. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening today to The Growth Engine. If you enjoyed this episode and like to hear more, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, and follow us on LinkedIn for regular updates, or on hubagency.co.uk. Thank you, and see you next time.